Good morning and welcome along to another episode of Beyond Bitcoin. My name is Derek Graham and with me today is Nitin Gaur, who is joining us on a monthly basis at the moment, giving us an update on what's happening in the tech world. Hello Nitin, how are you and welcome to 2025.
Hey, Derek. First of all, Happy New Year to you and to our audiences. Such a joy and pleasure to start this year off in talking to you, which I still, even though I have guest appearances, Derek, I have a FOMO now. I want to be back to my regular schedule because I miss being on a weekly basis at Beyond Bitcoin, but glad to be here and Happy New Year to you.
Terrific. Great to have you here too. And what I thought we'd do for the audience is just recently we've had a view of the marketplace, a view of certain sections of the tokens and what that's going to do in 2025. And of course, the audience is sitting there listening, thinking investment, are going, that's intriguing and that's... Now, one has to realize that this industry is full of tectonic shifts. And those tectonic shifts are based on technology. So for an audience that's listening to this, they've got to be getting their head around the fact that digital assets, blockchain, Web 3.0 are all confluences of technology that are starting to work as one. And none of this would be relevant and near as relevant if you weren't talking about the areas of artificial intelligence and, of course, regulations. And for the audience, that's what we're talking today. Firsthand, Nitin's giving us a view of what's happening with the use of artificial intelligence in finance and what's happening, of course, in regulations with Mr. Trump coming into power on the 20th of January. So, much to talk about there, Nitin.
It certainly is, and a lot. And you're right. I think if you look at the Jan 9th, which was actually the Bitcoin 16th birthday, it all started with the technical revolution, which changed the way we look at finance, the change we look at primary transmission mechanisms of assets, which is digital assets in general. So you're right, technology plays a huge role, and it's continued to play, whether it's zero-knowledge proofs or whether it's privacy preservation, whether it's cryptography. And now we have seen, I would say, Derek, in the last few months, a massive rejiggering of the conversation of cryptography with quantum chip that Google announced, and we'll table that for now. But the star of this year is going to be AI agentic framework. And just as a primer to many of them, as you know, AI has taken all of us not by surprise, but it has the awe of what it has done with large language models and how it solved a lot of knowledge worker issues. And we've seen announcements from many of the companies of reduction in software engineering because suddenly now this AI tools can write software. When we applied that similar structure, so artificial intelligence, it's artificial intelligence. It has a few structures where it evaluates data. It goes through the entire structure of creating a model and acting upon. So it's more than an automation system. Think of AI in context of DeFi, Derek, a automation system that can think. Suddenly now you're arming what used to be a bot-driven, which is very static, that you program a bot and bot does a few things when few events happen. We've seen that with robo-advisory back in the day. Suddenly now you have this agentic framework where you can program that with logic, and it has the ability to think and react and have the sense and response mechanism, which I would say, Derek, is shift from automation to autonomics. And the difference is automation, you automate things. And autonomics is just like our bodies have sense and response mechanisms. You are allowing this AI agentic framework to begin to start thinking like us, and we would implement those strategies of the thought process. In short, the impact of that on DeFi, just imagine this, Derek, that me and you spend a lot of time in figuring out what's happening with liquidity pools, what's happening with Aave, the decentralized exchanges. Suddenly now you have this agent framework that is ability to crunch the number faster than me and you can.
Yes.
We embed our thinking into it. I think it has an enormous impact on the industry as a whole. And I'll take a pause here and we'll try to morph this into an institutional DeFi conversation. But this has, to me, whatever we've seen now in terms of volumes and value, and we can discuss, I have discussed this with various governments this year, in terms of the volume of stablecoin settlements, instruments. But this AI agentic framework will really catapult the industry to a whole new level. We just need the right guardrails to manage it. So I'll pause here, Derek, to see if that made sense.
So, of course, much of the audience, you guys might be thinking to yourself, oh, FUD, FOMO. So the FOMO is your fear of missing out. And could you imagine, as Nitin is saying here, the ability to turn around and say, I have some Ethereum or I have some Solana, I wish to get a return on it. And this AI goes out and it literally farms all of the main providers of return so that it maximizes your yield within a set of parameters. And it does it every day. And so you don't have to be looking for the best yield on it. The returns could be quite extraordinary if you have this thing moving around and transacting your Solana or your equivalent of tokens and getting a high API on a daily basis. That's just one of the areas that it can create efficiencies. Remember, we constantly refer to DeFi as the banking infrastructure to Web 3.0. So you're starting to get even more efficient banking infrastructure. And also, of course, you start to get extraordinary investment opportunity coming that way. How are the institutions going to be involved with this, Nitin?
Yeah, and I think this year, again, I wrote another article at just the last day of this year, just to reflect an outlook, which I usually do every year to sort of, and I do it for myself, Derek, because you're able to just aggregate your thinking and distill it down to what you expect to see next year and it's informed opinion. I generally don't get into projecting prices because that requires a lot of analysis. So from an institutional perspective, two things, right? One is there is a wind shifting favorably towards regulatory apparatus. So as you know, Biden administration was quite antagonistic to the industry. They have had all these, and now all these things are coming with the new administration, change of guard. We've seen, Operation Choke Point 2.0 come to life, and FDIC paper, has released its Freedom of Information Act to Coinbase, looked into how systematically this industry was stymied, and I would give kudos to believers and thought leaders such as yourself and me included in that realm where we stood by the industry, and industry was resilient in spite of all the debanking that happened on the place. Suddenly now we have shift in that regulatory sort of wind, and it's in favor of the industry, which means that all the regulatory apparatus in the U.S., which is FDIC, OCC, SEC, CFTC, we've seen a change in narrative and change in tone. And I'm just thinking that if we have the support from the industry, imagine how many more businesses can flourish because they can have a bank account and they can pay their people and they can go after innovation. And so I think from that perspective, there is a new appetite. And I still, even though I work for myself, I have my own startup, as you know, LedgerLink. I am involved in consultative capacity as a senior advisor to many of the large financial institutions. And there is a movement. In fact, this morning I read one of the newsletters from DTCC, which is a centralized security depository and centralized counterparty, where there is a very upbeat outlook of what a digital equivalent of that CSD would be. And I think that that's such a positive thing coming from a very old financial institution that's beginning to think in what is their new role going to be if digital asset is in fact disruptive in nature. So I think that that's one angle, which is favorable regulatory elements. The second angle, Derek, is I see with the likes of the largest asset managers like BlackRock and few protocols that what we have witnessed with the success of DeFi, which by the way is nearing about 150 billion total value locked, stable coins have surpassed Visa and MasterCard's transaction volume. And now they're reaching about $209 billion, which is amazing numbers. I expect that the notion of what protocols have done for DeFi will be institutionalized. What that means is taking our previous conversation of AI agents, applying to the institutional DeFi for simple things like yield calculations and ability for me to be able to deploy capital with my intents of what I expect the returns to be. I think there'll be a rise of a lot of protocols coming with a regulatory wrapper around it from the large financial institutions like JP Morgan. And so I use the word rise of institutional DeFi, which is traditional finance exploiting the efficiencies that DeFi has, that we have seen with DeFi. So I'll pause here, Derek, to see if you have any comments on that.
Firstly, not just us, but our listening audience have been with us for a number of years. Yeah. They have heard us refer to Choke Point 2.0 for the last 3 years. And we've made the constant view or assumption that the main banks and institutions have been very active at working and lobbying with their peak body and other quasi-government organizations to stop crypto or to slow it down wherever they could. What's intriguing about the latest FIDC outcome is that this is proven now. This is getting disclosed and proven that they have actively closed accounts, shut down banks, being able to utilize and get involved with digital assets. Now, with this section, artificial impact on the market removed, then now the market will get back to its traditional dynamics, which is where can money be safest, where can it generate return fastest, and how can it do that? And it's been a journey that we've all been on, and now we're here. And we've got to have the understanding that this is quite a pivotal period. And on a bigger picture, which we've often said over the last 600 episodes that we've done of Beyond Bitcoin, by the way.
It's 600, really? That's
600
amazing.
episodes. That we've often spoken of the saying that the Gandhi was accredited for, whether it was just exclusively him, and that was, at first they ignore us, then they laugh at us, then they attack us, and then we win. And that's exactly what's happened. We've been through the time when no one was interested. We've been through the time when people would laugh at us. And we've been through a time when people literally are aggressive towards digital assets and cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. And now we're at a time when we're seeing the US institute reserves of treasury reserves of Bitcoin. I mean, who would ever have imagined that? Now we're looking at a point where the banks are working out how they can become more efficient and operate within this space. Now people are realizing that Web 3.0 is the next generation of the web, and it's inevitability of it coming. And of course, now with our love and fascination with AI, we realize that AI will become a lot more capable when it's getting utilized off blockchain-driven strategies, decentralized finance, etc. So we've come quite a way for this journey, for you to be able to sit here and say, look at what's happening now with the legislature.
Well, congratulations, 600. That's an epic number, Derek. And I would credit you for persevering through the whole thing, forcing all of us to come on, getting experts. So congratulations to you. I know we all were involved, but I think you're a single person behind it. But I think you have a point. But let me ask you the question, Derek. So you know how we've tried to bring global perspective to this show, right? We've talked about different countries. We've had guests from South Africa. We've had, you're from Australia. Yes. I live in the US. We travel a lot. We bring perspectives from India and Asia. Now that the winds are shifting in the US, do you think it'll have a ripple effect, no pun intended, for XRP here, but do you think it'll have a ripple impact on Australia and the fact that now MiCA, which I think is quite restrictive, even though we hailed it, that Europe has some clarity and it's better than having no clarity. And I think that when US comes out and let's say in 6 months to 8 months, we'll have some much more robust framework. And I think MiCA is quite restrictive. Do you think things will change in Australia? And do you think things will change in New Zealand and all around the world? Because suddenly now US is on board, even though people have moved on, but you think it'll have an exponential effect?
Yes, I do. I think it'll change a great deal. But one has to remember that as lovely as Australia is to live in, it is a laggard. It takes some time for Australia to follow things. And so it'll take a while for the banks to consider where they're going to get opportunities. After all, we've got 4 large banks, incredibly profitable and protected by regulation. So they're in no hurry to do a lot of things. So Australia will get there, but the biggest change is going to be change in attitude. When I would say that I've managed a cryptocurrency fund, people at different times of the last 5 years would react differently to me, because they'd turn around and go, oh, trading drugs. Or, oh, wow, this is it. We need to get in. Everyone needs to get in. It's all going crazy. Oh, my God, I've lost so much money, right? This is a sequence that's been happening over the last 5 years. But imagine for a moment that Bitcoin will continue its rise. Maybe it's $250,000. It continues its rise. Yes, it's volatile, but it continues its rise. And then they're constantly hearing announcements that this country now has Bitcoin in its treasury. This major corporation now has Bitcoin in its treasury. And so it'll get to a point where people are accepting Bitcoin as genuinely a massive store of wealth. And then the ripple-on effect through the other decentralized finance areas is going to build its credibility. And then we have to realize that as 5 years pass, and it has passed for us, we've been in this space for more than that, the generation that's been trading and dealing in this space is getting money and is actively involved in it and building wealth. And that means that more people realize that wealth is getting built in this space. All in all, I think these regulations are going to have this ripple-on effect to create a much better branded view of this space. And that in itself will bring it up towards equities as a major investment platform. And I think that's the goal. It won't happen immediately, but the trigger of America is everything.
True. And I think scale is one big thing that even like me and Petros, when we speak, like what United States has a scale, both in terms of the largest capital markets in the world, 600 trillion as we have put a number on it, and Bitcoin is still hovering around 2 trillion. So it's still minuscule. But there's one contrarian point of view to that, Derek, which I've been actually looking a lot in this Bitcoin ecosystems around, and that is, to me, I use Bitcoin as a marquee asset class that represents all the altcoins and the entire movement, is Michael Saylors of the world who have popularized the treasury conversation. Bitcoin as a treasury, which is store of value, store of wealth. Suddenly now you have BlackRocks and institutions. And I always go back to the original 8-page paper and the intention behind it. Suddenly now, if you find concentration of Bitcoin into these large institutions, well, it's great for Bitcoin because it's getting recognition, store of value, mobility of assets, and all that good stuff. But does it actually solve financial inclusion problem? Does it give enormous amount of control to institution, which was never intended? But we can table that conversation for later. But these conversations, to me, have been quite rampant. But there's another side of the Bitcoin ecosystem that's developing layer 2 protocols, trying to learn from Ethereum's success in creating these financial structures, which is things like DeFi and decentralized exchanges in Bitcoin ecosystem, because suddenly now you have $2 trillion, exactly to your point, Derek. I have $2 trillion of liquidity trapped in Bitcoin. And how do I move this liquidity to engage into these AI-driven DeFi protocols? I think that's the next wave I'm looking forward to in 2025, to see how can I actually intermingle liquidity, bringing true element of fungibility between Bitcoin as a marquee asset class and altcoin collectively, which represent about $3 trillion of economy today, catapulting additional protocols, additional value that can be generated. So that's super exciting, I think.
Yeah, very much so. So financial inclusion is going to be a very important part of all of this. And if we're talking about there's so many different products and technologies that are looking at providing Bitcoin with a yield, some APY on your major asset that you're going to generate a return on, it'll take Bitcoin to that other level. And yet again, this ability to remit a small amount of money, $10, across to your mother in Indonesia or a friend or something, or for that matter, remit $100 million in US dollar stablecoin across the world using a platform that could cost you as little as 10 cents. This is changing the dynamics of how Africa can deal between its countries. It's changing the dynamics of how a Filipino maid in Singapore can send money to her family, how a worker in Dubai can send money back to his family. Already, remittances are changing that. What I think is going to be the next level of change is going to be the access of these people that are dealing already in digital assets or digital currencies around the world in remittance to start utilizing decentralized finance to get a return on the money that they're earning. And you can see that becomes an international banking system that really does not exclude the smaller participant. And from a community point of view, I think this is an extraordinary direction for this. Now, by the way, those small participants, put them all together, that is a lot of money.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, absolutely. And Derek, I know we're debating a lot, and I think this year is exciting. I'm actually heading Davos next, and so next week is going to be even crazy, even better, because I begin to see now, Brian Armstrong, who's the CEO of Coinbase, for the first time coming to Davos. You find a lot of the traditional founders who have usually not left because they've always seen the Davos crowd as an establishment crowd, whereas crypto has always been anti-establishment. You find a lot of founders this time on main stage. And that is, to me, things are changing. When you begin to have leaders who are in the past, I remember Joe Lubin, who was the founder of Consensus, was shunned. He was not even invited. He was willing to pay $11,000 for the main pass. Suddenly now we have invitations now. So I think you're right. They fight us, they laugh at us, they fight us, and now they join us. Essentially the mainstream financial institution, mainstream establishments have recognized that this is not going away, and we might as well join forces. And so I think I'm super glad to see this change, as we all are in the industry.
Yeah, very much so. And for our audience who's listening here, well done for hanging in for this period of time and learning about the constant changes in this space. For those that have joined us just recently, what does this mean? It means get involved. It means get involved. Because don't look towards banking and equities as your only investment profile or your only view of how the world works. Things are changing so rapidly, and the impact on banking and the impact on equities will be substantial as digitized equities, digitized finance, DeFi, will really take over how our future is going to be. So stay with us. We'll keep everybody up to date with whatever we're hearing along the way. You're going to Davos. Fantastic. I'm keen to catch up with you in a couple of weeks after Davos and let the listeners hear about what happened at these very high-level governmental talks that happen out at Davos. Great to have you on board and great to have you here, Nitin.
Thank you, Derek. Always fun to be here. Love it. Have a good day.
Good on you.
Bye.
Happy 2025, everyone. See you next week.